Alright guys, this is MarkBoy316 with another video, and today's going to be my top 5 UFC DVDs that I recommend that you should go check out and watch. So here's the first one. It's Where It All Begins Again. Where It All Begins, UFC 1. There's got Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie. Ken Shamrock's on here. Pat Smith, who was a kickboxer. And this one here looks like it runs. DVD, what's the runtime? The new Hall of Fame interviews, it's got fight selections. I think the runtime though does not say. Right there. 89 minutes, about an hour and a half. It's the very first UFC ever. So that's cool. Back then, when the UFC first started, it had no rules. There are no rules. It even says right here. It's uncut. And some great stuff on here, like I said. Ultimate Fighting Championship. So, there's that one. Next one here, this is just an amazing set. The Ultimate 100 Greatest Fights. And I mean, it's the entire 100 fights. It's a countdown from 100 down to the greatest fight of all time. It's got Randy Couture on here, Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre, BJ Penn, Brock Lesnar. And it's a six disc Blu-ray. It's got all 5 episodes of the Ultimate 100 Countdown show for the Blu-ray exclusives. And 26 hours. It'll take you an entire day without skipping anything. It'll take you an entire day to watch this. 26 hours. Look at that. That's huge. 100 fights. So you'll be entertained. I highly recommend you get it. Some tremendous fights on here. Great stuff. And this one is UFC Making History. UFC 100. Nice slipcover here. There's the front. There's the back. Take the slipcover out. This one had Frank Mir versus Brock Lesnar, George St. Pierre versus Thiago Alves, John Finch versus Paulo Thiago, Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping, and Akiyama versus Alan Belcher. And they got preliminary fights and bonus material, countdown to UFC 100 and behind the scenes. And it's a two-disc set. So that's pretty cool. And I highly recommend you try to go get this one. UFC 100, Brock Lesnar, Frank Mir, tremendous fight, and great stuff on here. Next one here is Ultimate Submissions. We got George St. Pierre, Kenny Florian, BJ Penn, Anderson Silva, Josh Koscheck, and more. Ultimate Submissions. So, you want to see some great submission wrestling, or submission fighting? Here we go. UFC, there it is. It's got 34 fights and 20 bonus fights. So a lot of fights on here, some great stuff. Some of the best submission fighters in the world. And then of course you got UFC Ultimate Heavyweights, 34 fights. Brock Lesnar, Shane Carwin, Frank Mir, you got them. You got Lesnar versus Carwin, you got Lesnar versus Frank Mir, you got Roy Nelson versus Brendan Schwab, Frank Mir versus Czech Congo, you've got, Junior Dos Santos versus Gilbert Eve, Frank Mir versus Shane Carwin, Roy Nelson and Stefan Struve, and you got like 5 full bonus fights and 4 classic fights. So you get 10 bonus fights on here too, so that's pretty cool. And that's a lot of stuff. UFC Ultimate Heavyweights. So highly recommend you get that one if you want to see some great fights and the best of the heavyweights. So really highly recommend that. This one runs, what's this? 156 minutes. So usually all the UFC DVDs and stuff run an insanely amount of time, a long running time. But you'll be entertained and you'll be enjoying. If you are a UFC fan and haven't seen Ken Shamrock, if you've seen Ken Shamrock and you've seen Brock Lesnar in UFC, check him out in WWE. Same thing if you are a wrestling fan. If you've seen Ken Shamrock, Dan the Beast Severn, who else? Dan the Beast Severn, Ken Shamrock, Brock Lesnar, And people like that, if you only seen them in WWE, check them out in UFC because they were just as good, and it's awesome. So the crossover is pretty cool. Some of them do well, some of them don't do as well when they cross over. But highly recommend you check these DVDs out. So those were my top UFC DVDs for you guys to check out. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.